Good evening. My name is Tony Fisher. I am the minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples. On behalf of the congregation and Common Ground, I welcome you to the 2015 Progressive Voices Speak Out series. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples is a welcoming congregation, freely seeking intellectual and spiritual growth. We strive to create a larger community of peace, justice, and love. The goals of Progressive Voices fit clearly within the scope of this wider mission. For 15 years, the organizers of this series have sought to identify key issues and challenges facing the world and our community, and then invite thought leaders and scholars to address those issues in a lecture series that stimulates our curiosity and enriches our intellect. The hope, of course, is that a deeper understanding of those issues and an exposure to new insights will enhance our personal journeys and give us the tools we need to engage a diverse world, so that ultimately, individually and in community, we can make a positive difference both locally and globally. We're very grateful for your presence here this evening. I would like to thank the organizers, the committee of Progressive Voices Speak Out, Frank Hatcar, David Griffith, Barbara Glasgow, Will Beckler, and Jim Swank. If they could stand. Thanks to everybody to help organize the outside and the refreshments. We're very appreciative of that. And I will turn the podium over to Frank Hatcar to introduce this evening's speakers.
Thank you, Tony. "2014 has been a disheartening year. It seems like there's a war going on against women and children worldwide. We selected this topic as our first featured lecture because this is a very important issue of the day. There is oppression, suppression, and repression of women, and worse, particularly in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and North Africa. There is Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS, and many more. Even right here in our land, in America, our professional football players and university campuses are being ruthlessly treated. There are unending domestic violence. What is going on? There is some silver lining, however, to this unending tragedy. Many women have marched on and now are CEOs of global companies like IBM, GM, DuPont, Xerox, Pepsi, Yahoo, and many more. We may even have first woman president, who knows? Our speakers will address this women's march forward as well. We indeed are fortunate. We have two women here, Judith and Linda Overhouse, both extremely knowledgeable about this catastrophic situation, and will address questions like what is happening and why, what we need to do about it. They will paint both global as well as local picture. Judith holds a PhD in professional development. She has been a school inspector, school principal, a former lecturer at University of Durham in the UK, visiting lecturer by invitation at both Harvard and Stanford. Judith has done international consulting work, and she has lectured around the world. Linda has over 20 years of professional experience experience in the human services field. She joined as Executive Director of the Shelter for Abused Women and Children right here in Naples in 2007. Before that, she served as Executive Director of Florida's largest domestic violence center in Tampa, Hillsborough country. Linda has an MA in social work from University of South Florida and has participated in numerous management and leadership programs. Linda was named in 2009, Linda, as Power Woman of Florida Weekly. And in 2012, she was named Person of the Year by Naples Daily News columnist Jeff Lyle. Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed fortunate to have two brilliant women to defend women and children in this global war against women by enlightening us and many others like us about this tragedy. Finally, I will quote Mahatma Gandhi, who relentlessly supported women in India and said in 1937 that when women will rule the world, we will finally have peace. He was right. Judith, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you to the organisers of Progressive Voices Speak Out for inviting me to be part of this prestigious programme. It is indeed a privilege to be here. Let me tell you a little about myself in connection with this crucial topic, global war against women. You've heard of my professional... Can you hear me at the back? Right. You've heard of my professional resume. That's certainly only part of who I am. I'm a wife of many years, the mother of two sons, the grandmother of two girls who were grown up in America, now young women aged 23 and 25. My granddaughters know me well. A recent Christmas present from granddaughter Rachel was presented with a twinkle in her eye. A book with the provocative title, Full Frontal Feminism. I think that probably says it all with regard to how my family see me. They know of my commitment to women's issues. Probably like many women in this room, much of my life has been dedicated to women and their role in the world. As a feminist, I'm not quite sure about the full frontal. I subscribe to the concept of the social, political and economic equality of the sexes. However, my granddaughters also have an ironic sense of humour. They've been brought up in America, but they've retained British irony. The latest gift from Rebecca, aged 25, was a contribution to an international charity to provide a bicycle for a child in a developing country. Her eyes were twinkling also. They both know that whatever else I've managed to achieve in life, I've never quite managed to learn how to ride a bike. My history. I grew up in the northeast of England, a working class area populated by coal miners, with an overarching cultural perspective of male dominance, encapsulated in the phrase, "No wife of mine will ever work." So probably like many women here, I battled against predominant cultural stereotypes in order to have a full-time career as an educator and subsequently as an entrepreneur and consultant, whilst also being a mother and wife. My sense of collective responsibility with and for other women began when I worked as a voluntary counsellor at a family planning clinic and also for RELATE, the National Marriage Guidance Council. 26 years ago, I moved to live in the Cayman Islands. Domestic violence was a cultural norm. However, one of the benefits of small islands is the opportunity to directly impact government. I co-chaired an organisation, 16 Days of Activism Against Gender Violence, and we were able to influence cultural attitudes through local TV programmes, a regular newsletter, and public marches. This in turn influenced government. Relevant domestic violence laws were changed, a women's centre was set up, a shelter was provided for abused women, whilst local lawyers, more accustomed to earning millions in an offshore financial centre, set up a project to provide professional legal advice on a pro bono basis for women who were victims of abuse. And now to Naples, where I'm an escort at Planned Parenthood. I also volunteer internationally, assisting in a not-for-profit foundation, Coaches Across Continents, established in 2008 by my son. My official title is Education Strategist, but you'll not be surprised to know that my role is much more diverse than that. Sometimes a gopher, whatever needs doing. I aim to take part in at least one programme per year, which gives me the opportunity to work with women in countries as diverse as Uganda, Tanzania, Cambodia, Namibia, and this year coming up, Zanzibar, which is of course part of Tanzania, and India. Coaches Across Continents uses sport as a vehicle to create self-directed learners who can identify, address and solve problems specific to their communities. Our adaptable curriculum seeks to empower people to question harmful traditional, cultural and religious practices, to choose their own futures and to create change within the context in which they live. Last year we worked in 26 developing countries. Our work impacted over 280,000 young people, and our areas of influence include gender equity and female empowerment, as well as health and wellness and conflict resolution. Our programme of structured problem solving supports participants to become independent critical thinkers who work at defining and solving problems collaboratively. I'll mention later in context some of the programmes I've worked on, but let me briefly mention one now, because every time I think of it, it makes me smile. We were working in a town called Kigoma on the shores of Lake Tanganyika with a mixed group of Muslim and Christian young women dressed appropriately to their religion. This was the first year, after 2 years of trying, where they were allowed by the community to take part in our programme. And our activity was designed to develop self-esteem. I can still hear in my head their voices. We asked them to say, "I am a girl, I have a voice, listen to me," before commenting individually on what made each of them special. From "I am clever" to "I can do anything as well as boys," their faces brightened as their voices rang out. No wonder that memory still makes me smile. My values, they're perhaps obvious. I share with Hillary Clinton the view that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights. With that in mind, you'll not be surprised to know that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is one of my personal Bibles. Now to my presentation of this evening. How many of you watched Downton Abbey? Aha! You will have observed that we Brits have very correct ways of doing things. My accent and my resume clearly demonstrate that I'm British, although I have to tell you that my genealogy indicates that I certainly didn't emerge from the aristocracy. However, inevitably, I've been enculturated to many British norms. I'm unfailingly polite. If someone walks into me on the sidewalk, I apologise to them for my presence. If someone says it's hot, I say it's not cold. And as an aspiring critical thinker, I can often be heard arguing against myself mid-sentence in an effort to consider every aspect of an issue. But not tonight. Tonight, my role is that of a global citizen. In their 2015 annual letter, Bill and Melinda Gates called for global citizens, informed, passionate individuals working together to form effective movement for change for many of the poorest people in the world. As a global citizen, I am outraged when I learn of the experiences of women all over the world. Whilst I'm analytical and thoughtful as to causes and potential solutions, I can't hide the shock and horror I feel when I hear of their lives. Therefore, this evening, I aim to be fierce with reality, a wonderful phrase from F. Scott Maxwell. I want to speak to your reason and your intellect, but also engage your emotions. Let me share with you a piece of poetry from Mitsuya Yamada entitled Masks of Women, which illustrates this. This is my daily mask: daughter, sister, wife, mother, poet, teacher, grandmother. My mask is control, concealment, endurance. My mask is escape from myself. Here, I shall remove my daily mask of me. Like the used skin of a growing reptile, it peels away and releases. My mouth is a funnel. Words implode within and burst forth through an inverted megaphone. My eyes command your attention. Stare me down. I will not look away. Tell me to laugh it off. I will not wince a smile. I move to resist. I will act, and I become. Tonight I'm inviting you all to remove your daily masks. I'm inviting you to hear harsh realities, both here in America and on the world stage. I'm inviting you to deepen your awareness of the global war against women, but also to recognise that there are significant opportunities for change if we all engage as global citizens. First of all, let's address the question, why is there a global war against women? I'm suggesting in this presentation that all over the world, women are victims of inequality. Oppression, suppression, and repression permeate their everyday lives. Through oppression, the beliefs of the dominant group are the ones internalised by society. Oppression is manifest in prolonged, cruel or unjust treatment. Paradoxically, oppression draws strength from the acquiescence of its victims, with lack of resistance deepening its power. The act of suppression prevents things from happening, whilst repression controls or limits someone by force or by the exercise of authority. Women experience all three in different ways within different societies and cultures. They are victims of injustice, are prevented from exercising full authority in their lives, whilst their behaviours are controlled and limited. Why is this a concern? A quick response from the perspective of social justice would be that it's just not fair. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that all people, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. To treat half of the world's population as second-class citizens is just not fair. Whilst a pragmatic response recognises that there are economic and social outcomes as a result of limiting the actions of such a significant proportion of the population. Emmeline Pankhurst, a leading suffragette in Great Britain, said, "We have to free half of the human race, the women, so they can help free the other half. Half of human assets are wasted when women are disempowered. Imagine a bird trying to fly with only one wing. In short, society would gain from focusing on the benefits of human capital as well as financial capital. So both ethically and pragmatically, gender inequity is problematic. What are the root causes of the war against women? In his recent book, Jimmy Carter, former president of the USA, outlines his views on how religions impact women. I will specifically be discussing the impact of religion on women in greater depth at a meeting here at the UU at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 22nd of February. I told you I was going to say that, Flo, so I'm happy to invite her to come. But suffice it to say that the many belief systems of a world impregnated by religions impact all of our societies. Clifford Geertz, a famous American cultural anthropologist, captures this view, claiming that overarching cultural norms emerge from religious beliefs. From beliefs in supernatural controlling powers emanates the ways in which we live our daily lives. Religions which privilege the concept of patriarchal power lead to cultures based on the assumption that men and boys are superior to women and girls. In turn, this assumption provides justification for sexual discrimination in every area of life. The power and control exerted over women throughout the world is both overt, with clearly observable effects, and covert, where attitudinal effects are pervasive but less evident. Why do we accept such inequities? The concept of social constructionism explains the process and power of enculturation and demonstrates that our innerness, our perceptions, the way in which we understand the world, are all shaped by the cultures in which we grow up. I said earlier that oppression draws strength from the acquiescence of its victims. However, the problem is that the victims, conditioned as they are, do not necessarily see their victimhood. My favourite phrase to capture this mindset is "the fish are the last to discover water." My favourite corollary came from a former student who wrote, "We must unswim the fish before we drown." How can we unswim the fish? There are, of course, many positives in this war against women, in the fighting back. The Declaration of Human Rights declares that people have certain inalienable rights. I've probably taken that from the Constitution. But of course, human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. And we at cultures across continents have used the UN Declaration as the basis for our policy and programme on women's rights worldwide. Many of these rights have been achieved for women in the Western world, including America. As Frank said, women have come a long way. They're equal with men before the law. They can own property, have a right to choose marriage and to work, have a right to education and the right to participate in the cultural life of the community. Women make up 20% of the US Senate. 3 women sit on the Supreme Court. More than 100 women are in Congress. More than half the medical and law students in America are women. Half of the Ivy League schools have women as presidents. I could go on. But in the developing countries, this is not the case. A key factor for women's rights globally is being equal with men before the law. Trust Law Connect, a group that the charity that I'm involved with is linked with, is a not-for-profit organisation dedicated to promoting women's rights around the world. And it takes as their mantra the phrase, "Put the rule of law behind women's rights." They recognise that in many developing countries, the law is not as supportive of women as it is here in America. Achieving gender equality under the law is clearly a crucial priority for them. However, even here in America, even where laws have changed to support women's rights, even where women have made significant steps towards equality, there are still disparities between policy and practice, and an abyss between awareness and behaviour. Entrenched attitudes die hard. Laws alone are not enough. So the challenge in fully achieving women's rights lies in many arenas. It's necessary to examine taken for granted practices that reinforce inequities. It's necessary to be reflective on prevailing attitudes that diminish women and girls, and to examine society and the media to identify stereotypical images that are reinforced without consideration. Former President Jimmy Carter suggests that the war against women is comparable to segregation and racism. Laws may change, but changing attitudes and behaviours is more complex and a long-term process. A further dimension, beyond gender equity, is the concept of female empowerment. Gender equity measures what it says, equity between men and women. Female empowerment goes beyond this and questions whether there is actually another way of being successful. We live in a world where the framework for success has been defined based on masculine dominance. What does it mean to live in a male world? What is a good life? Power and money are the concepts that come to mind quickly, followed closely by control. Power and control have been the underlying tenets of the war against women. In her recent book, Survive, the Third Metric, Arianna Huffington challenges this view and aims to redefine success in claiming that it's important to create human capital as well as financial capital. She suggests that well-being, wisdom and wonder, plus giving of ourselves prompted by compassion and empathy, are necessary for a good life. We need to thrive rather than just survive. What's the current reality? I could submerge you in statistics that would horrify you. Time is limited, so I'll try instead to capture the key factors, but know that I have the statistics to back up my assertions. The Global Gender Gap Report of 2014, published by the World Economic Forum, captures the magnitude of gender-based disparities. The index benchmarks national gender gaps on economic, political, education and health criteria and provides country rankings. The 2014 report indicates that the Nordic countries, egalitarian societies, lead the world in narrowing the gender gap between men and women, whilst America comes in at number 20, and my home country of Britain is further down still. But in addition, the United States is the only one of 7 countries in the world that has not ratified the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. It will surprise you to know that other countries include Iran and Sudan. The war against women has many battlefields, and one of them is that of gender stereotyping. How does the world see women? How do women see themselves? When do women knowingly or unknowingly contribute to gender stereotypes that limit their position? Naomi Wolf's The Beauty Myth was published almost 25 years ago. She argued that beauty is part of a belief system that keeps male dominance intact. What has changed in the intervening years, if anything? I wonder who watched the Super Bowl on Sunday. I did. Well, some of it. The recent Super Bowl ad from Procter & Gamble's Always division asked the question, what does it mean to do something like a girl? The responses acted out a common insult. Girls running whilst protecting their hairstyles, throwing a ball weakly, hitting without force. Yet when girls were asked the same question, they ran as fast, hit as hard, and threw as far as they could. We use this activity in our Cultures Across Continents curriculum with women in the developing world. The activities and subsequent discussions are illuminating and empowering. A recently published documentary, Misrepresentation, explores women's underrepresentation in positions of power and influence and challenges the limited and often disparaging portrayal of women in the media. It's good to see that as a counterbalance, the Lean In organisation, founded by Sheryl Sandberg, is seeking to break down media stereotypes that hold women back. Getty Images recently launched the Lean In collection, featuring photos of female leadership in contemporary work and life. By portraying women as powerful and strong, photography, journalism and advertising together can change the way the world looks at women, but we need to be aware of it. Another battlefield, a powerful battlefield, is gender-based violence. Let me give you the academic and socio-political description of that. Gender-based violence is rooted in a global culture of discrimination, which legitimizes the appropriation of women's bodies for individual gratification or political ends. As a former academic, I recognize the coldness of that description. The reality is distinctly more harsh. It is the reality of bruises, of pain, of fear, of exploitation, of lack of trust. Let me give you a few statistics that reflect worldwide figures. 1 in 5 women will be a victim of rape or attempted rape in her lifetime. And at least 1 in every 3 women worldwide has been beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused. A woman is more likely to be raped or murdered by a current or former partner. Victims of rape are often blamed for the rape. In the West, this is sometimes on the basis of provocation. In other parts of the world, I remember reading news stories from India, it is just because they were there. Is gender-based violence endemic in the Western world, including America? An important question is, do women feel safe in America? Women are harassed in public spaces. I really recently watched a YouTube that showed the experiences of a young woman walking along busy streets in New York. She was harassed several times a minute by men not known to her. Frank mentioned campus attitudes. They illustrate the overarching perspectives of many male students. A research study by the University of North Dakota indicated that 1 in 3 college men say they might rape a woman if they knew they would not be found out. This prevalent rape culture is based on the expectation that there will be no consequences, with an underlying assumption that this type of relationship is normal. This culture obscures the fact that rape is a serious crime. The US rape culture is perpetuated by fear. 3/4 of young women victims do not speak out. We need to ask what it is about our systems and processes that prevent them from doing so. It is good to see that in 2014 the White House launched a new sexual assault prevention campaign called It's on Us that hopes to mobilize college men to get involved in the fight against campus rape. This education campaign primarily focuses on teaching students how to practice effective bystander intervention. They're encouraged to get involved in situations that seem to be headed in dangerous directions. And then we have the comment that Frank highlighted. We have alleged sexual abuse by sports figures, invariably leading to no prosecution by the police in sexual assault cases. No means no was chanted by Oregon players following a Florida State game recently, in reference to a player who has battled sexual assault accusations for the last 2 years. It's alleged that the college did not adequately invest a rape claim. I understand that this is not the first such allegation. And that is America. What about the developing world? The impact of war is great. Rape has long been used as a weapon of war. Violence against women during or after armed conflicts has been reported in every war zone. With coaches across continents, I worked in a small community called Padir in northern Uganda, with women who had been abducted among the 23,000 child soldiers captured by the Lord's Resistance Army. Often forced at gunpoint to decapitate their parents by machete, these women were forced to fight as soldiers as well as being used as sex slaves. Rehabilitation back in their home communities proved difficult. Our work with these young people helped them develop skills of value to their community. I'll always remember a young woman who I refer to as Fosco. Fosco was head girl in the Friends of Orphans school. She was training to be a welder. She wanted to start her own business. An orphan, she took care of her younger siblings. She understood Ugandan politics and was familiar with how many women were in the national parliament. She wanted to make her world to be different and was prepared to take action to make it so. She was a survivor and an inspiration. Others were less fortunate. In preparation for my Ugandan experience, I researched the effects of war on women. I turned to a book called War Is Not Over by Anne Jones. War is not over for women when a conflict officially ends. Moments of military victory often bring little relief to civilians. Women and children suffer the most. When men stop attacking one another, women continue to be convenient targets. When soldiers raped during war, rape becomes a habit taken up by civilian men and carried seamlessly into the post-conflict time, ironically labelled peace. I was deeply disturbed by what I found. I learned that women and children of all ages were vulnerable. They were raped in their village homes, hiding in the bush, at work on their farms, harvesting crops, military roadblocks, in front of their husbands, their parents, their children. There was no place of safety. Rape victims were also often cast out from their families or disowned by their husbands. Teenage pregnancy resulting from rape ended the girl's education and her marriage prospects all at once. Her family was shamed. She was stigmatized. And then, of course, we encounter honor killings. The United Nations estimates that approximately 5,000 women are murdered each year as a result of honor killings. But women's groups in the Middle East and Southwest Asia suspect the number is at least 4 times as high. Child marriages. It's estimated that 51 million girls worldwide, largely from poor families, have been married before the age of consent, often in exchange for property and livestock, leaving them with a pregnancy death rate double that of women in their 20s. In many communities around the world, in all communities around the world, girls are seen as less valuable than boys. As a result, an estimated 60 million girls are missing from various populations due to the selective abortion of female fetuses and the mistreatment in their collective female children. The Lancet estimates that in 2011, between 310 and 600,000 selective abortions of girls were performed in India. Let me come now to the topic that is deeply disturbing and somewhat embarrassing: female genital mutilation. Resistance is the secret of joy. So ends Alice Walker's provocative novel on female circumcision, Possessing the Secret of Joy, which I read several years ago. The cultural factors which contribute to negating female sexuality, the passivity or potential anger felt by women victims of such paternalistic forces, are vividly expressed in the story of Tashi, a tribal African woman who lives most of her adult life in North America. She dreams they have imprisoned her and broken her wings. Female genital mutilation arouses widespread horror in the Western world. What are the facts? An estimated 135 million girls living today have undergone that procedure. Each year, an estimated 3 million more girls become victims. The procedure is mostly carried out on young girls, often between infancy and the age of 15, and it can cause severe bleeding and ongoing problems, urinating, infections, infertility, complications in childbirth, and increased risk of newborn deaths. As I came in this evening, a colleague of mine, Bernie Turner, who founded both Walden University and the Naples Center for Critical Thinking, gave me a leaflet and some information. I've got to look at it carefully without my specs, but it's about a woman called Edna Adan, who founded a hospital in Somaliland to deal with women who had experienced these problems. So thank you, Bernie, for that. But hearing all of these facts and figures, and beginning to imagine the reality of that procedure, do you feel outraged? We then have domestic violence, spousal abuse, intimate partner violence, and I'm not going to say too much about that because, of course, Linda will be discussing it more fully. But statistics demonstrate shocking attitudes around the world, an overarching attitude of cultural acceptance of violence against women in general, together with a perspective that domestic violence is a private matter that should not be referred to authorities. In the developing world, 102 countries have no specific legal provision against domestic violence, and in at least 53 countries, marital rape is not a prosecutable offence. And even where legal protection exists, women overall are largely unaware of their rights. During Cultures Across Continents' recent programme in Cambodia, the women we worked with thought it reasonable they should be disciplined by their husbands for non-compliance, whilst just in January of this year in Haiti, young women said it was okay for men to beat their wives if they burned the food. I'm horrified by human trafficking and slavery. Although slavery was officially abolished worldwide at the 1926 Slavery Convention, it continues to thrive thanks to the complicity of some governments and the ignorance of much of the world. I'm going to give you some facts today because they're surprising and horrifying. There are more slaves today than at any other point in history, namely approximately 27 million. 56% of them are women. The average price of a trafficked human is at a historic low of $90. Slavery is an extremely profitable international industry. The typical age of entry into prostitution is 13 to 14. In the Western world, trafficking in the United States yields $9 billion every year, and roughly 18,000 nationals are trafficked into the US each year, California being the major trafficking entry point. 70% of all prostitution is handled by pimps, who keep most of the money. That is in America. In the developing world, around 2 million people, the majority of them women and children, are trafficked annually into situations including prostitution, forced labour, slavery or servitude. And one reason why trafficking has been ignored is that the victims are voiceless. We need to look at women's health, reproductive health and maternal mortality. Maternal mortality has been identified as a global crisis and the greatest health inequity of the 21st century. And pregnancy and childbirth-related complications are the #1 killers of girls aged 15 to 19 worldwide. The United States has a higher rate of maternal deaths than at least 40 other countries, even although it spends more money per capita on maternity care than any other. We must ask why. But in the developing world, for women in a developing country, giving birth can be one of the biggest threats to her life. Half of the births are to adolescent girls, who are 5 times more likely to die in pregnancy than older women. Around the world, at least 1 woman dies from complications related to pregnancy or childbirth every minute. While I've been talking, 30 women will have died. And 99% of these deaths occur in developing countries. And these are from treatable conditions that become fatal due to inadequate access to medical care. Only 50% of women in developing countries have a skilled medical professional present. Up to 2 million women in the world are currently living with obstetric fistulas. An obstetric fistula is a hole between the birth canal and bladder and/or rectum caused by a prolonged obstructed labour, and it leads to chronic incontinence. It occurs because young women during the first birth in rural areas of the poorest countries are bearing children without access to any medical help. And there's a negative impact of international actions on the lives of these women. As part of foreign aid, the US has been one of the most important donor governments. However, politically motivated policy restrictions apply. Due to the Helms Amendment of 1973 and the global gag rule, US funding has been prohibited for use for abortion and cut from other medical services, while unsafe abortion is a major issue for many developing nations and a leading cause of maternal mortality worldwide. This is a clear example of how Washington ideology affects vulnerable women worldwide. Women in sub-Saharan Africa are 8 times more likely to be HIV positive because cultural norms prevent them from being able to protect themselves. If we move on to education, we recognise that access to education is a basic human right, as well as a significant factor in breaking the cycle of poverty. But despite this, millions of girls and women around the world are denied the opportunity to attend schools. If they are educated, then the economic impact in their community is great. Their children benefit, but they are denied access. And of course, we all know the story of Malala, who has become a figurehead for promoting women's education. In terms of economic empowerment, women play a vital role in the economic prosperity of their family. but they earn less than 10% of the world wages, but do more than 2/3 of the world's work. Even in the Western world, the pay gap between men and women persists. The average full-time working woman in America earns just 77 cents for every dollar a man earns. Policies in the Nordic countries have made it possible for parents to combine work and family, resulting in more shared participation in childcare and a more equitable distribution of labour at home and a better work-life balance of both women and men. And these policies have lowered the opportunity cost of having children. But in the developing world, women own less than 2% of the land, but produce more than 90% of the food. And statistics show that when they have access to the land and have ownership, everything benefits. Their children, the education, the economic prosperity. Where next? Let me look at some worldwide movements that are seeking responsibly and thoughtfully to address the problems of gender inequity and female empowerment. Men and women need to work together. Men could be women's best allies in the march towards equality. If the woman problem has always been a man problem, then clearly it's beneficial for both genders to work together to address this issue. Emma Watson was named the United Nations Women Goodwill Ambassador early last summer, and she delivered a speech at the United Nations recently and launched the official campaign, He for She. The goal is to motivate men and boys to end gender inequality. She asks men to take up the mantle so their daughters, sisters and mothers can be free from prejudice, but also so that their sons can redefine masculinity and have permission to be vulnerable and human too. I've already mentioned the It's On Us campaign about mobilising college men. This campaign acknowledges that changing male attitudes is a prerequisite to changing behaviour. There are worldwide movements with the Millennium Development Goals, which placed at the forefront several women's issues. And we're now coming up to 2015, and effort is being put into looking beyond 2015 as to what next. Vision 2020, the I Decide campaign by the International Planned Parenthood Foundation, is seeking to ensure that their campaign supports the Vision 2020 to continue to place women's issues at the forefront. And of course, I've mentioned Bill and Melinda Gates' foundation's annual letter. They've made many contributions to the developing world. They are currently saying that the next 15 years will make the biggest difference in the life of the poor. And they are suggesting that, as I said earlier, that informed, passionate individuals need to work together to make effective movements for change, namely global citizens. The media is changing. A number of people here may have seen A Path Appears recently on TV in response to the book Half the Sky, published in 2010. A unique narrative is coming forward about how a difference can be made in the world and a roadmap to becoming a conscientious global citizen. And I suggest to you that you seek to watch the PBS documentaries there. Many agencies, many movements, many foundations worldwide are seeking to promote the rights of women. In our charity, what do we do for gender equity and female empowerment? I said we use sport as a vehicle to create self-directed learners capable of identifying, addressing and solving problems specific to their communities. Our female empowerment programme is called Ask for Choice. We begin by asking the question, do your customs fit today's world? This helps the people involved question harmful traditional, cultural and religious practices and encourages them to look with fresh eyes at the taken for granted cultural certainties in order to recognise contradictions between, and I'm using a quote from our recent Mexico programme, the world that our hearts tell us is possible, so aptly described, and their current realities. Our games, by developing problem-solving skills, empower those taking part to recognise and choose between options in their specific context. The final step is change. So we encourage communities to question dogmatic cultural certainties, to recognise contradictions between the current reality and the desired outcomes, to challenge the existing situation, to choose from possible alternatives, and to take action to bring about change. We describe our approach as challenge, choose, change, and it's built on strong attitudes, skills, and knowledge that enable them to do this. Let me give you a couple of examples. We work closely with a community program in Marsabit, Kenya, where 100% of women and girls are subject to genital mutilation. Girls were frequently captured by neighbouring villages and raped. These girls were then ostracised by their families and forced into marriage with the rapist. The rapist avoided paying a dowry or bride price. As an outcome of our programme, the local women worked together to find a way to prevent or minimise the kidnappings. Truly an example of a local community of women identifying and solving a frightening problem. Simple but so powerful. To look at the world as if it could be otherwise. To speak a language of possibility. To take charge of your own lives within the confines of your community. Each and all are massive steps on the journey to female empowerment. I have arrived at my concluding thoughts. In our world's journey towards gender equity and female empowerment, what should we do? What can we do? We must recognise that the rights of women and girls is the unfinished business of the 21st century, and that men and women can come together as allies in the march for gender equality and female empowerment. We must hold on to the recognition that girls and women possess a huge and untapped potential. When educated, healthy and equipped with the right skills and opportunities, they hold the key to unblocking many of the world's most pressing problems. As educated mothers, they will invest in the survival, education and success of the next generation. As leaders of today and tomorrow, they can be a force for social change. How can we help them? We need to resist our inherited worlds and rethink the world that has been created around us and in which we have been created. We must break our inner idyll of complacency. Our blindness is pointed. We partake in double-think. We all need to be de-educated and unslaved from the traditions of the past. We must unswim the fish before they drown. We must hold tight to the thought, if we know of it and do nothing, we're a partner in the crime. We can become involved in the Gates Project as global citizens. There is a war against women, a war fueled by power and control traditionally given to men across the world. But there's also a war being fought on behalf of women, a war for equal rights, a war for human rights, a war for our daughters and granddaughters, but also a war to free our husbands and sons so that we can be equal partners in our shared efforts to make our shared world a better place. Challenge, choose, change applies to us. We must challenge current realities and inequities, choose to address key issues, and change the world for women and thus for men. If we do this, we can turn oppression into opportunity. We can turn suppression into resistance. We can turn repression into voice. It begins with a sense of outrage. It begins with us. Thank you very much.